How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video, we're going to talk about our next two potential snow and severe weather threats in the Midwest and determine if you're going to experience tornadoes, potentially a significant snowstorm in your area, and we'll also determine if that has the possibility of moving into the Northeast, because there is that possibility. You guys might see some snowfall, especially if you're a little bit further northward into the Northeast. But first, let's take a look at the GFS model, and we clearly see, for the most part, throughout the United States, it's relatively clear we do have a pretty strong ridge that's dominating much of the country. However, we do have a trough that's moving ashore right up along the Pacific Northwest that's bringing heavy snowfall in the higher elevations. Rain showers in the lower elevations. Places like Seattle and Portland are experiencing rain showers, and this is expected to continue to move eastward and create just enough of an unstable environment for potentially a significant severe weather threat to develop right over the Ohio Valley, as well as some snowfall in not only the higher elevations of the West Coast, but for portions of the Midwest and the Northeast as well. So first, let's continue to move forward with how this trough will move. So we see that by the Monday afternoon time frame, much of the snow should cover much of the Pacific Northwest at this point. Heavy snowfall right over Idaho, extending into Montana. And we do see that this low pressure is relatively strong. It's at 990 millibars, so it certainly has a strength to produce a heavy amount of precipitation over a pretty large area like we're seeing right here. We're seeing that snowfall extend as far east as the longitude of Wisconsin and as far west as the Pacific coast. So this is a very elongated storm, and more importantly, there is a pretty large area of cold air that's just behind it that's going to create just enough convective activity for a severe weather threat to develop. As we do see, this is right around the Tuesday morning time frame. We see that much of the snow has moved out of the Pacific Northwest, and it's now over the northern Midwest. But I don't expect a ton of snow from this. It won't be an extremely powerful snowstorm. You should maybe see right around 1 to 3 to 3 to 6 inches of snowfall in portions of northwestern South Dakota and the central and southern portion of North Dakota, as the area of snowfall isn't that large. And for northern Minnesota, it should be a fairly similar amount. You should expect maybe around 3 to 5 inches of snowfall in the more northern portions of Minnesota. This includes city like International Falls. You should expect some snowfall from this storm system. It won't be a powerful amount, or it won't be a high amount of snowfall accumulation, but still at least something to be aware of for your Tuesday afternoon to Tuesday evening commute. And we do see that snow does move a little bit southward into Nebraska and Colorado as well, but in those areas the snowfall should be even less, probably only around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall, which again isn't a ton, but still something you want to be aware of, because even 1 to 3 inches of snowfall could create some slick road conditions right over Nebraska and the northwestern portion of Colorado. The higher elevations of Colorado, however, should experience a lot more snowfall, so you definitely want to be aware of that in those areas. But moving forward with the forecast, we see that the convective activity certainly increases right over the Ohio Valley, extending into Illinois, Indiana. Chicago could get involved with some severe weather, as this is certainly capable of producing the possibility of tornadoes. If we were to take a look at the convective available potential energy levels for this storm system as it continues to head further eastward, we see that by Tuesday time frame, this isn't a ton of convective available potential energy, but certainly enough to bring some damaging winds associated with some of these thunderstorms, and the possibilities of tornadoes do exist based on the wind shear that we're seeing in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So if we were to take a look at that, we do see that the wind direction does shift quite a bit with height, which is certainly required for tornado activity. So it won't be a significant tornado threat. I'll say it's going to be very isolated if we were to see any tornadoes, and tornadoes probably won't be very strong, but still certainly could be life-threatening. You definitely don't ever want to underestimate any sort of tornado, no matter how weak or powerful it is. So you definitely need to be aware of that right over Illinois. for this as we approach the Tuesday evening time frame. As that's when the worst, you should expect the worst of the impacts right over Illinois, Indiana, and maybe even the extreme eastern portions of Missouri. But moving forward with the forecast beyond that point, let me show you guys the severe weather outlook provided from the Storm Prediction Center for Tuesday and into Wednesday. So here's what the Storm Prediction Center is forecasting when it comes to the possibility of severe weather right over the Midwest. We see that the area of a slight risk of severe weather includes pretty much almost the entirety of Illinois. Same goes for northern and central Indiana, where cities like Indianapolis, Chicago are involved, as well as St. Louis is involved with this, as this could produce a slight possibility of tornadoes. But I do believe that the biggest risk with these severe thunderstorms will be the damaging winds right over the slight risk area. And don't underestimate the slight risk area either, because I'll say that the chance is higher than slight risk. Like we typically see during the severe weather season, some people might misconstrue a slight severe weather risk as a very low possibility, but the possibility isn't as low as you think. So you still need to be aware of that right over this area of the Midwest as we approach Tuesday night. But if we were to move forward into Wednesday, we see that the predictability is too low, as it seems like the chance of a severe weather threat should diminish by the time we approach Wednesday, as instability definitely reduces. Going back to the forecasted radar from the GFS model, we do see that there is that possibility of maybe some snowfall right over Chicago. It's going to be very light. I'll say maybe a tracing at best, and there's still the possibility you might not experience any snowfall on the backside, but temperatures will quickly reduce once you pass through the first area of convective activity from this storm system, where we're going to see a strong northerly flow that's certainly going to reduce the temperatures quite a bit by the time you move past the severe weather, and that could allow for the possibility of snowfall in Chicago, Milwaukee, and portions of northern Indiana and western Michigan. However, I don't expect it to be very heavy, because we clearly see that the area of precipitation that's in over temperatures that are below freezing is very small, especially this far south. So it likely will be a lot of snowfall, as much of the convective activity where the precipitation is snowfall will be just to the north of Chicago, where pretty much where the winds are trying to push the convective activity towards and make this storm transition into more of a classic mid-latitude cyclone, where we see more of a bow echo look, which means that the southern side of this storm system won't get a lot of snowfall from this, but still be aware that maybe around Wednesday afternoon for that possibility of some snow showers over Chicago. Now, moving forward with forecast, we see that this convective activity continues ahead further eastward into the northeast, and this could bring possibly a heavy amount of rainfall by the time we approach the Wednesday afternoon to evening time frame for much of the northeast. So definitely be aware that for your evening commute, it's unlikely that the snowfall will move up along the coastal cities of the northeast. There is that possibility you might experience some snow showers in the higher elevations of the northeast, certainly, and in the more interior portions, but it won't be a lot of snowfall, as much of the heavier snowfall will be well to the north of this storm system, and it's thanks to this ridge that's just going to block the cold air from being able to move further southward and allow the possibility of snowfall to be higher for much of the Midwest and Northeast, and that seems to be a common trend over the next week or two. So there is that possibility that maybe it might be rough when it comes to the possibility of receiving snowfall in some of these coastal cities, which I know might be a bummer for a lot of you. You definitely would want to see more snowfall, I'm sure, for some of you guys before we approach a spring time frame, but it just seems like the current trend is that we're going to be under a fairly strong ridge. So mainly the areas in the northern portions of the U.S. will experience snowfall, while the more populated areas a little bit further southward and closer to the coast is certainly less likely. But in the northeast, if you were to experience any snowfall, it'll likely not be anything more than 1 to 3 inches of snowfall, and it'll include the more interior portions of the northeast, mainly exclusively. But let's take a look at the forecasted snowfall to give you guys a better idea of what I'm talking about. So if I were to move forward with the forecast, we see that again, northern Minnesota should experience right around 3 to 6 inches of snowfall, while the central and southern portions of North Dakota should mainly experience more like 1 to 3 inches of snowfall, while other areas of the Midwest, like I said, it's probably gonna just be a tracing at best, maybe in Chicago, Milwaukee, and maybe Des Moines as well, and Minneapolis, but not much, at least from this first storm system. And then if we were to move a little bit more forward with the GFS models forecast into the northeast, we see that some areas do experience maybe around 3 to 6 inches of snowfall, but I'll say more likely than not, it'll be mainly 1 to 3 inches of snowfall in the higher elevations, while the areas in the lower elevations and closer to the coast, there's pretty much no chance you're going to receive snowfall out of this, unfortunately, for those hoping for snowfall. So don't hold your breath for that, but definitely be aware of the possibility of heavy rainfall by the time we approach the Wednesday evening time frame for a lot of these areas. However, that's not the only threat we're monitoring that could approach the Midwest and Northeast in the short, or maybe a little bit more in the long-term future. We also have this other storm system that I believe will be more powerful and certainly has the potential of bringing not only a more significant severe weather threat, but a more significant snow event for the West Coast as well, where we see that this brings far heavier snowfall throughout the entirety of the West Coast, and this even moves southward into California as well, into the Sierra Mountain ranges and into Nevada as well. And there's plenty more cold air for this storm system to work with, which could induce a pretty significant severe weather threat. We see that based on the latest run of the European model on Monday, March 4th. Look at how powerful this storm system is. It's at 977 millibars, and we see this classic bow echo mid-latitude cyclone look, which shows that this storm system is extremely powerful, and it's certainly capable, in my opinion, of bringing potentially a pretty significant severe weather threat right over the Midwest. We have that perfect scenario where we have a strong ridge along with a strong low, just amplifying the storm system in a huge way by bringing a strong, heavy amount of very moist and warm environment further northward to interact with this very cold environment just so west of it. And we also have a negative tilt with the jet stream, which is only amplifying the amount of instability right over this storm system, because we now have the warm air that's slightly just to the north of this cool air mass, and that's just making the air molecules move all over the place and really spin around at a very rapid pace to the point where the updrafts will be very strong, the convective activity will be very strong, the amount of lift that's in the atmosphere will be very strong for the potential of a significant severe weather threat and snowstorm to develop out of this. Now, we're going to need to see if this comes to fruition, but this would be extremely significant. Definitely a blizzard for much of the western Midwest. This includes places like western Kansas, western Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, as is just an extremely powerful storm with its millibar pressure dropping down to the 970s, and this could potentially bring a very significant severe weather threat for much of the Midwest. So there's definitely something to keep in mind. There's still a lot of time to iron out the forecast. What will be key is how strong the ridging will build just to the east of it, because if this ridging becomes a little bit too strong, then this storm system will become even more powerful, because that'll create a negative tilt in the jet stream that would amplify the amount of instability and lift that this for this storm system to be very powerful and impactful for the Midwest, like we see with the European wall, where this ridge becomes very strong, and so strong to a point where it blocks this low pressure system, and it forces a jet stream to have a negative tilt, where the warm air is intruding just to the north of the cool air mass just to the south of it, and that's creating a highly unstable environment that's creating a very powerful storm system. So if this ridge ends up being strong as it's currently anticipated to be, this would be something to definitely be concerned about. And there's also questions regarding the track, because there's still that possibility that maybe this ridge could be weaker, and we see a weaker storm but a track a little bit further westward that could bring the snowfall a little bit further westward as well. It just wouldn't be as significant of a severe weather event, but still pretty significant. So still a lot of time to iron out the forecast, but I'll definitely keep you guys updated once we get a little bit more certainty. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.